Captain James Ellis stood at the command center of Earth's largest warship, the Resolute, staring at a massive holographic map. His fingers hovered over the console, his mind racing with the calculations that had come to define his career. But today, it wasn't tactics or strategies he was grappling with, it was something far more unsettling. A catastrophic mistake had just sent humanity careening toward the brink of annihilation. "Sir, we've received an emergency transmission from the High Command," Lieutenant Mara Kavanaugh said, breaking the silence. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days, her eyes bloodshot but determined. She handed Ellis a sleek data pad, the words on it stark and urgent. Ellis snatched the pad, his brow furrowing as he read the message. "Earth has declared war on the Trivak Empire?" he muttered. The words felt absurd on his tongue. The Trivak were the deadliest species humanity had ever encountered, their bloodlust unmatched, their technology far superior. The fact that Earth had somehow, accidentally, made such a declaration was unthinkable. "You're telling me that someone, somehow, triggered a declaration of war by accident?" Ellis asked, disbelief threading through his voice. Kavanaugh nodded, her tone steady. "Yes, sir. An ambassadorial meeting went sideways. A translation error. The Trivak didn't take too kindly to the implications. And now, their fleet is en route to Earth. They'll be here in less than 48 hours. Ellis swallowed, his throat dry. He could feel his pulse quicken. The Trivak didn't negotiate. They didn't ask for surrender. They didn't care for diplomacy or nuance. They exterminated. "Is there any chance we can reverse this?" Ellis asked, his voice low, already knowing the answer. Kavanaugh shook her head. "The Trivak don't negotiate with mistakes, Captain. Once a declaration of war is made, it's irreversible in their eyes. They'll come. They always do." A knot formed in Ellis's stomach. He turned back to the map, his mind reeling with possibilities. Their fleet was nowhere near ready to face the Trivak's might. No one could be. The Trivak didn't just have ships, they had an empire that had been built over millennia. An empire that had wiped out entire species with ease. "Prepare all ships for immediate deployment," Ellis ordered, voice steely with resolve. "We'll meet them head on. If we're going to die, we'll make sure they know humanity's name." Hours later, Ellis stood on the bridge of the Resolute, the crew around him working at a fevered pace. In the cold, sterile environment of the ship, the hum of machinery was the only sound, but beneath that, Ellis could hear the rising tension. A moment of human error had led to an inevitable collision with a species so brutal that their very name was a curse across the galaxy. The Trivak warships were known for their brutal efficiency, their weapons capable of decimating entire fleets in a matter of minutes. The humans, with their untested war machines, were mere ants in the path of a predator. Still, there was one thing Ellis had learned over his years as a commander. Humans might not be the strongest, but they had an unbreakable will. "Status update on the Trivak fleet?" Ellis asked, his voice betraying none of the anxiety that churned within him. Kavanaugh, now seated at the tactical console, turned to him. "Their lead ship, Vrektar, is a monster. We've intercepted communications. They're advancing at maximum speed. They want to make a statement, Captain." Ellis's mind raced. Vrektar was infamous, a Trivak warship so large that it could obliterate entire planetary defense systems with its weaponry. And it was heading straight for Earth. "How many ships are in their fleet?" 20, sir," Kavanaugh replied, her eyes narrowing at the display. "A full battalion. But we're only tracking the ones that are heading for Earth. There may be more." Ellis's fists clenched at his sides. Earth had no defense against this kind of force. He glanced at the communication panel. There was an incoming message, the flickering lights of the console signaling a direct transmission from Earth's High Command. "Patch it through," Ellis ordered. The screen flickered and an image of General Marcus Reeve, Earth's highest-ranking military official, appeared on the display. His face was grim, his uniform pristine, but his eyes shadowed with the weight of the situation. "Captain," General Reeve's voice crackled through the calm, "you're our only hope now. The Trivak will arrive within hours. We've called in all reserves, but we can't match them. It's up to you and your fleet. Ellis nodded, his mind racing. General, are there any options left to avoid this war? Any chance of negotiation? Reeves shook his head. It's too late for that, Ellis. You're on your own. We're counting on you to hold them off, buy us time to evacuate key targets. We won't be able to fight them off, but maybe we can slow them down long enough for the rest of humanity to escape. A chill ran down Ellis's spine. They weren't going to win this war. They were just going to survive long enough to escape it. Understood, Ellis said, his voice cold. We'll do what we can, General. But I won't let them take Earth without making them pay for it. Reeves' eyes softened for a moment, then hardened again. Good luck, Captain. The fate of humanity rests with you. The screen cut off abruptly, leaving Ellis in silence. For a moment, he stared at the map of the galaxy, the distance between Earth and the Trivak fleet narrowing with every passing second. His thoughts were clear. Earth's survival wasn't just about winning the war. It was about surviving long enough to outlast the Trivak's merciless approach. Get the fleet into formation, Ellis ordered, standing tall. We're not going down without a fight. As the Resolute moved into battle formation, the looming presence of the Trivak fleet grew ever closer. Ellis felt the weight of the impending conflict like a crushing pressure on his chest. They were going to fight a battle they couldn't win, but that didn't mean they wouldn't fight. That didn't mean they wouldn't make the Trivak remember the name of Earth. As the final countdown began, Ellis felt a surge of resolve. No matter the odds, humanity would stand strong. They had no choice. The first shots of the war would be fired soon, and Captain Ellis would lead his people into the unknown. The Trivak had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive. The harsh hum of the engines reverberated through the Resolute as Captain Ellis stood at the bridge, staring at the tactical display. His hands were clasped behind his back, the weight of the upcoming battle pressing down on him like an invisible hand. The Trivak fleet was only hours away, and with every passing minute, the situation grew more dire. His ships were outmatched, outgunned, and underprepared for a war that had arrived without warning. Captain! Lieutenant Mara Kavanaugh's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp and steady. We've received new intel on the Trivak fleet. Vrektar is not only the flagship, it's equipped with a quantum disruptor. If it fires on Earth, the entire planet's defenses will be crippled. We have no chance of winning head-to-head. Ellis nodded grimly, absorbing the weight of her words. The quantum disruptor was a weapon so advanced that it could render entire planetary defense systems useless in one strike. If the Trivak used it, Earth's best chance for survival would be obliterated in seconds. How long before they reach Earth? Ellis asked, his voice steady, betraying none of the unease that stirred within him. 2 hours, sir, Kavanaugh replied, her eyes never leaving the console. They're moving faster than we anticipated. The rest of the fleet is spread out, but Vrektar is leading the charge. Ellis glanced at the screen. The icons representing Earth's scattered defenses blinked weakly against the vastness of space, a testament to humanity's struggle to prepare for a war they hadn't seen coming. He had less than 2 hours to figure out a plan that could buy them more time they didn't have. The ship's communication officer, Ensign Brooks, spoke up from his station. Captain, we've intercepted a message from Vrektar. It's direct. They're demanding immediate surrender, or they'll initiate a full assault. Ellis clenched his jaw. Put it through. The screen flickered, and for a moment, nothing appeared. Then, the hollow voice of General Vrektar, the leader of the Trivak forces, filled the room. His words were cold, calculating, and devoid of emotion. Humanity! Vrektar's voice echoed across the bridge. Your declaration of war has sealed your fate. Surrender now, or you will witness the annihilation of your species. We will not tolerate further delay. Ellis stared at the screen, the icy calmness of the Trivak general sending a chill through him. He had no illusions about what would happen if Earth capitulated. The Trivak didn't just conquer, they eradicated. Tell them we will not surrender, Ellis said, his voice unwavering. Prepare the fleet for battle. We may not win, but we will fight. The seconds bled into minutes, and Ellis paced the bridge, his mind racing. The Resolute was one of the most advanced ships in Earth's fleet, but it was still no match for the overwhelming power of the Trivak. He needed to think to act. He had always prided himself on being a strategist, but this was different. The enemy wasn't just stronger, they were inevitable. "Captain, the Trivak are firing their first salvo." Kavanaugh's voice snapped him back into focus. "They're not wasting any time. All hands brace for impact." Ellis barked, his voice firm. The ship shuddered violently as the first wave of energy blasts slammed into the Resolute, sending jolts of pain through the hull. Alarms blared, and sparks flew from several consoles. The crew moved quickly, scrambling to stabilize the ship. "Shields holding at 62%, Kavanaugh reported, her fingers flying across the controls. "We can take another hit, but not many more." Ellis gritted his teeth. They were already taking damage, and they hadn't even fully engaged. "Return fire," he commanded. "Target their outer ships. Take out their smaller vessels first." His orders were followed swiftly. The Resolute unleashed a barrage of laser fire, the bright green beams slicing through the darkness of space. Several Trivak ships exploded in bursts of light, but for every ship they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. "Sir, we're outnumbered," Lieutenant Sorensen, the weapons officer, called out from the back. "The Trivak are focusing fire on us now. We can't hold out like this." Ellis knew that Sorensen was right. They were fighting a losing battle, but that didn't mean they would stop. Every minute they bought could mean the difference between life and death for the people back on Earth. "Engage evasive maneuvers," Ellis ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to make it harder for them to target us. Kavanaugh, I want every available fighter launched. We'll give them hell, even if we're going down." The ship lurched as it spun into an evasive course, dodging incoming fire with a series of sharp turns. The fighter jets deployed from the Resolute's hangar bays, streaking into the void, engaging the Trivak's smaller ships in a daring dogfight. Explosions lit up the black sky as the two fleets collided. Ellis watched it all unfold, his mind never ceasing its calculations. Every moment mattered. Every shot fired could be their last. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the entire ship, and a large explosion rattled the bridge. "Report!" Ellis barked. Kavanaugh's face had gone pale. "We've lost the starboard engine, sir. We're drifting." "Get us moving again!" Ellis snapped. "Get us back in the fight." "Trying, Captain," Kavanaugh replied, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked frantically. "But the damage is extensive. We can't maneuver at full capacity." Ellis's eyes scanned the tactical display. The Trivak were closing in, and the Resolute was sitting duck in their sights. His mind was racing, but as the seconds ticked away, a thought struck him. "Send a message to Earth," Ellis ordered. "Tell them to initiate Plan B. If we don't make it, the war will be theirs to finish." The message was brief but filled with urgency. Earth's leaders had no choice but to make their move. Earth's survival rested on the shoulders of the Resolute's crew, but Ellis knew the truth. There was no longer a chance of victory. The only thing left to do was buy enough time for humanity's last hope. Ellis's heart raced as he turned his focus back to the battle. The Resolute may have been the finest ship in Earth's fleet, but it was still no match for the might of the Trivak. He would do what he had always done: lead, fight, and never surrender. "All hands prepare for final engagement," Ellis said, his voice steady, betraying none of the fear that gripped his heart. "We fight until the end." As the Resolute's systems flickered and alarms continued to wail, Ellis braced for what would come next. Humanity's fate was no longer in their hands, but it would not be because they hadn't fought. The cold void of space had never felt more suffocating to Captain Ellis. The Resolute was a wreck. Half of its systems were offline, its hull scorched and groaning under the strain of continuous fire. The Trivak fleet was relentless, their warships encircling like vultures, ready to finish what they had started. Ellis stood alone in the dimly lit command center, the flickering lights casting long shadows across the bridge. His crew had fought valiantly, but it was clear that this wasn't a battle they could win. There was no help coming, and the planet below, his home, was just a target waiting to be destroyed. "Captain, the Vrektar is moving into position," Lieutenant Kavanaugh said, her voice strained. "They're preparing to fire the quantum disruptor. Earth will be defenseless within minutes." Ellis didn't flinch at the news. He had expected it. The Trivak weren't interested in negotiation. They wanted to make an example of humanity. The moment they fired that weapon, Earth would be lost, and with it, all hope for any future. "How much time do we have?" Ellis asked, his eyes never leaving the tactical screen where the enemy ships glided closer. 5 minutes, sir," Kavanaugh replied, her fingers flying over the controls as she worked to keep their damaged systems running. "We're too close. They'll fire soon." Ellis felt a coldness creep over him. 5 minutes. That was all the time they had left. In the face of overwhelming power, humanity's last hope rested in the hands of a handful of desperate soldiers aboard a dying ship. "Captain, Ensign Brooks interrupted, looking up from his station. "I have an idea. It's crazy, but it just might work." Ellis turned, the faintest trace of curiosity breaking through his exhaustion. "Go on, Ensign." Brooks hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, his face etched with determination. "The quantum disruptor works by targeting a planet's defensive systems, scrambling its defenses and rendering them useless. But the Vrektar can only fire on a fixed trajectory. If we can get close enough to the disruptor cannon's targeting system, we might be able to disable it before they fire." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "That's a hell of a gamble, Ensign. The Trivak will see us coming a mile away, and we'll be sitting ducks." "I know," Brooks said, his voice unwavering. "But it's our only shot. We won't survive if we don't try." Ellis stood still for a long moment, considering the proposal. In the face of certain death, there was little left to lose. They could either go down fighting, or go down without a shot fired. It seemed almost poetic, the idea of humanity making one last, desperate stand against the galaxy's most merciless species. "Prepare the shuttle," Ellis said, his voice firm. "I'll take a team in. We won't let them have Earth without making them bleed for it." The shuttle was a battered relic, its hull reinforced with whatever materials the crew could salvage. It wasn't built for a fight, it was built to get in and out unnoticed. But as the countdown to the Trivak fleet's attack began, it became humanity's final hope. Ellis, Kavanaugh, and a team of 10 soldiers boarded the shuttle, each of them fully aware that they were probably stepping into a death trap. The Resolute's weapons were offline, and their shields were barely holding. They were going to be a blip on the Trivak radar, an insignificant target against the might of the Vrektar. But for some reason, in that moment, Ellis felt a flicker of something, a sense of resolve, maybe even defiance. "Are we really doing this?" one of the soldiers, Lieutenant Adams, asked as the shuttle engines hummed to life. He looked over at Ellis, uncertainty in his eyes. Ellis met his gaze, his voice calm. "This is what we do. We fight." The shuttle cut through the stars, maneuvering as best it could through the chaos of battle. Ahead, the Vrektar loomed, a gargantuan mass of metal and destruction, its weapons primed and ready to unleash hell. Ellis gripped the armrest, eyes fixed on the target ahead. They were about to make their move. 30 seconds to the disruptor targeting system," Kavanaugh announced, her voice steady. "We'll be visible to them any second now. Brace yourselves." Ellis nodded, his thoughts racing. If they didn't manage to disable the quantum disruptor, it would be the end. For Earth. For humanity. As they neared the enemy ship, the first warning lights flickered on, and a loud alert blared through the shuttle. "We've been spotted," Kavanaugh said, her voice tense. "Incoming fire!" Ellis's eyes widened as enemy fire zipped past them, grazing the shuttle's side. The ship shuddered, and sparks erupted from several panels. He knew they didn't have much time. "Target the disruptor's primary control node," Ellis barked. "Full power to the forward thrusters, now!" With a final burst of speed, the shuttle raced forward, its engines straining against the damage. The Vrektar's massive cannon loomed ahead, and Ellis could see the faint glow of its targeting system preparing to lock onto Earth. "We're too close!" Kavanaugh cried, her voice breaking with panic. "They'll shoot us down before we even reach it!" But Ellis was already moving, stepping toward the shuttle's rear hatch. "We don't need to reach it. We need to disrupt it." He punched in a series of commands on the control panel. The shuttle's rear hatch began to open, and the harsh vacuum of space rushed in, but Ellis didn't hesitate. He grabbed the emergency thruster pack, attaching it to his suit. "Get to the targeting control now," Ellis said, his voice determined. "I'll make sure we stay on course." Kavanaugh stared at him, eyes wide. "Captain!" "Just go!" Ellis shouted. Outside the shuttle, the chaos of battle swirled around them. Ellis's heart pounded in his chest as he floated into the vacuum, his thrusters firing to stabilize him. He moved toward the Vrektar, the giant warship looming ahead. Every instinct screamed that this was madness, but he pushed those thoughts away. He had made a promise: to fight, to protect, to survive. The shuttle surged forward, and just as the Vrektar's cannon began to glow with deadly intensity, Ellis activated the shuttle's last-ditch defensive protocol. The small burst of energy sent shockwaves into the Trivak's targeting system, just as it began to fire. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. The Vrektar's weapons sputtered, flickered, and then went dark. The massive warship's cannon shut down just as the disruptor's beam would have reached Earth. Ellis allowed himself one small breath of relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, humanity had scored a victory. It wasn't over, but they had won a battle. And that, in itself, was enough for now. "Disruptors offline." Kavanaugh's voice crackled through his comms. "We did it, Captain!" Ellis looked at the stars around him, his mind spinning with the weight of it all. The war wasn't over, but for the first time in days, he allowed himself a moment of hope. Humanity had just made its first stand. And they weren't going down without a fight. The Resolute hung in the void of space, battered but alive. Captain Ellis stood at the bridge, his eyes fixed on the remains of the Trivak fleet. The victory had come at a high price. Almost everything had been sacrificed to disable the quantum disruptor, but they had done it. They had prevented Earth's immediate annihilation. Now, in the aftermath, there was a fragile silence. The ship's systems were failing. Their comms were down, and the sensors were barely operational. Still, they had succeeded where no one thought they would, against a foe far superior. For a brief moment, Ellis allowed himself to feel a glimmer of pride. They had held on. "Captain!" Kavanaugh's voice snapped him back to the present. She was at the comm station, her face strained with concern. "We're receiving a signal from Earth. It's coming in on an emergency frequency. They've picked up our distress beacon." Ellis turned, surprised. "Patch it through, Lieutenant." The screen flickered, and General Reeves' face appeared, his expression grave. Behind him, Ellis could see the faint outline of Earth in the distance, the blue planet hanging in space like a precious gem. "Captain," Reeves began, his voice tight with emotion. "We've received confirmation from all over the world. Everyone is watching you. Your victory has bought us time. But you need to know, the Trivak haven't given up. This isn't over." Ellis met Reeves' gaze, the weight of his words sinking in. "How much time do we have, General?" "We've got maybe 24 hours, Reeves said. "The Trivak are regrouping, sending reinforcements. You've disabled their quantum disruptor, but they still have the firepower to obliterate us. You bought us a moment of respite, Captain. But they'll be back. And they'll come stronger." Ellis gripped the edge of his console, the gravity of the situation settling in. "I understand," he said. "We'll make the most of the time we've got." As the transmission ended, Ellis turned to face the crew. They were exhausted, their faces drawn, their bodies weary from the battle, but there was a fire in their eyes, a spark of defiance. They had fought against the impossible and emerged victorious, at least for now. "All hands listen up," Ellis called, his voice carrying over the bridge. "We've bought Earth some time, but the war isn't over. The Trivak will be back, and they'll come in force. We need to prepare for their return. This is our last chance to strike back before they regroup. We'll hit them first. Lieutenant Sorensen, the weapons officer, spoke up, his voice edged with disbelief. Captain, you're suggesting we attack them while they're regrouping? We're barely holding on as it is. Ellis turned, meeting Sorensen's eyes. We don't have the luxury of waiting. If we don't take the initiative, they'll crush us when they return. We'll strike hard and fast, hit their supply lines, cripple their reinforcements. The Trivak have underestimated us so far, and we need to keep them off balance. Kavanaugh nodded, a determined look on her face. I'll get the fleet ready. We can use the damaged ships as decoys and take out any weak points in their formation. It won't be easy, but if we time it right, we might catch them before they're fully assembled. Ellis took a deep breath. We're all in this together, no matter what happens. We've already proven that we're capable of more than they think. Now we finish this. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The crew of the Resolute worked tirelessly, repairing what they could, reloading weaponry, and preparing for the next engagement. The fleet, though battered, was still a force to be reckoned with, and Ellis knew that they needed every ounce of strength to survive. As the sun began to rise over Earth, the ship's systems flickered back to life. The crew had managed to restore limited communications with Earth's command center, and they received word that humanity had been preparing, too. Earth's remaining military forces had begun to mobilize, gathering resources and organizing their defenses. But Ellis knew that none of this would matter if they didn't act swiftly. The Trivak were as relentless as they were strategic. When they returned, Ellis knew they would be better prepared, their firepower doubled. The Resolute and the remaining Earth fleet had only one chance: strike now, before the Trivak could recover. The plan was simple: hit hard, disrupt their operations, and slow them down. Every minute counted. Ellis paced the bridge, his mind calculating, his hands trembling with the anticipation of the coming battle. Captain, we've got incoming Trivak ships, Kavanaugh reported, breaking his concentration. They're not wasting any time. Ellis nodded, his resolve hardening. Send out the fighters. Hit them fast. We need to send a message: they're not invincible. We're not going down without a fight. The battle that followed was chaos, a brutal, unforgiving struggle where every shot mattered. The Resolute led the charge, its remaining weapons firing with precision as the Earth fleet swarmed around the Trivak reinforcements. The Trivak were caught off guard, their ships scrambling to regroup, but it was clear that they were beginning to recover. Ellis watched as the battle raged on. Earth's forces were outnumbered, but they had something the Trivak didn't: determination. The soldiers aboard the Resolute fought with a tenacity that the Trivak couldn't anticipate. Even as the ship took fire, even as systems flickered and alarms blared, the crew refused to relent. Captain! Kavanaugh's voice came over the comm, urgent. We've taken down their outer fleet, but there's another wave incoming. We can't keep this up for much longer. Ellis didn't hesitate. Give everything we've got. We're fighting for our future. For Earth. The last few minutes of the battle blurred in Ellis's memory. The Resolute had taken heavy damage, but they had done what they set out to do: disrupt the Trivak's plans and delay their reinforcements. The Trivak had been forced to retreat, their momentum shattered, but the cost had been staggering. Ellis knew that they couldn't keep fighting this way forever. But for now, Earth had one more chance to prepare. As the final wave of Trivak ships disappeared into the distance, Ellis allowed himself a moment to breathe. He turned to Kavanaugh, his voice steady but weary. We've won today. But there's still much to be done. She nodded. Yes, Captain. But we're still here. And we're still fighting. Ellis looked out the viewscreen, his eyes locked on the distant Earth. The battle wasn't over, but humanity had proven something important: they weren't just survivors. They were fighters. And no matter how many times the Trivak came back, humanity would always stand tall. We'll fight until the very end, Ellis muttered, his voice carrying a quiet determination. Because that's what we do. The war was far from over, but in that moment, Ellis knew one thing for certain: humanity would never give up.